Could someone told me a year ago, not only are you going to officially come out, you're also going to get a new job and you're going to move. Oh, and P.S. You have a partner. I would have been like, no.
Welcome to the I Did Not Sign Up for This podcast, a weekly show dedicated to highlighting the incredible stories of everyday people. No topic is off limits. Join me as we explore the lives and experiences of guests through thought-provoking, unscripted conversations. I'm your host, Carling, a Canadian, queer-identifying 30-something-year-old providing a platform for the stories that need to be heard. Hello, Katie.
Hello.
My God, we were just saying offline, it felt like we just talked a year ago, but it was 2020 since you and I last recorded.
An entire lifetime ago, if
Like
you will.
literally a whole lifetime. It's so
Yeah.
nice to see your face and hear your voice.
Yes, you too.
You were so kind to be a guest when I was just starting out. And I mean, I still don't always know what I'm doing, but I even knew less. But you were episode 39,
Wow.
and we met just a while before that doing CrossFit.
Doing CrossFit. That's right. Oh my God.
So funny.
Yes. I know that was so unique when you went, Kathy's your mom? I
Yeah.
follow her on TikTok. And
Yeah.
that's how that connection even happened.
Yeah. I was like, this is wild.
Yeah.
So the first episode 39 that we did, we talked about your relationship with your mom and creating memories because she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And she was living in BC at her parents' house with her sister.
Yes. One of her sisters is also in BC and also lives with her at parent house now, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah, their father, my grandfather, you may have seen on the TikTok, but recently passed away.
no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, my grandfather, you could probably
Yeah.
tell from the TikToks, he was in an exorbitant amount of pain for a very long time and in his late 80s. He passed away January 29th, I believe it was.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry.
It's tough, but I can make it sound logical.
Yeah.
It didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't abrupt. It wasn't because of an accident. He got to pass the way he wanted to,
Oh,
given the circumstances. But my mom tells me that he's died every day
because she
because
can't remember.
she doesn't remember that I know.
Yeah.
And she's aware that he has. I don't think it's that every day she's having to go through, oh, her dad died. I
Yeah.
hope, but she doesn't remember that certain people know. I think
Mm.
unless you're visually in front of her on a day to day,
Yeah.
she'll forget. Even if you are visually in front of her day to day, she forgets.
And I think that's a side of Alzheimer's that we don't think about is that
Yeah.
those things when there's a loss, sometimes you are the person that has to tell them every day because I couldn't imagine finding out for the first time every day
Right?
that my dad died.
It's just horrible. So since we last spoke, lots of changes in her life have
Yeah.
occurred in line with Alzheimer's. She's now in a full-time facility called Trillium or Acacia. She's there Monday to Friday and goes back to her mom's place now in that she was staying with before with her sister, typically on weekends. But it's starting to become very difficult for her to do that transition. Even if I were to live in one place during the week and somewhere else during the weekend, I know for me that would not feel
Yeah.
great. I can only imagine. It's structured, but not.
Yeah.
So we're now starting to see that's not really working as well long term anymore. Like it's just not within her best interest anymore.
And was it her decision to go into, or was she part of the decision to go into the long-term care facility?
Yes and no. There were some days, most days she loves Trillium. She talks about it. She recently got a bigger room. That was a big to do. She has quite a few friends there and enjoys the staff, but she didn't want to not be at home.
Mm,
But her needs at home became more than what her current caregivers could provide.
right.
Then, as her Alzheimer's began to get worse, she's had some aggressive moments or just moments. She's not the mom or the person that I remember that I know she is to be. Sometimes she'll call you a bitch 10 times in a conversation.
Oh,
And it's not even that she's trying to really be malicious. She just thinks it's funny. It's not for the
yeah.
majority of the rest of the world. Or if she's out, she'll go and sit at someone's table, like at a restaurant, and just sit down and start talking to them. For which, again, for the majority of the world, that's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Stranger I don't know. And
Yeah.
especially in COVID times, like, absolutely not. But she just wants to talk to someone different,
Right.
which I get it. I would want
Yeah.
to too. So there's just the social norms or understanding what's acceptable socially or what's even tolerated. And she can no longer take care of herself, hasn't been able to take care of herself independently for a while. But now we've gone into the helping with like basic necessities as far as like showering, going to the bathroom, things like that. She requires assistance and 24/7 care.
Oh, that's so hard. And how old is she now? 61?
62? We have the same birthday. So she
But
turned
still, like,
21 when I was of
when you
0
were
age,
0.
and now I'm 40. 62?
Yeah.
That's horrible, I don't know. I
But
think 62, so still very
that's
young,
so young.
very young, very young.
And was she doing any treatment? I can't remember if I know that there's no cure, but is there treatment or therapies that she's doing?
There are, but it comes down to what works for the individual.
Mm.
Alzheimer's is so tough. One day she loves art, the next day she hates it. One day she wants to go on walks, the next day she's just irritated the outside world even exists. So, as far as something consistent, no. The one thing that she has consistently always loved is music. One of the friends of Jean, her sister, her name is Barb, and they take her to a pub that has jazz music.
Oh, nice.
And so she gets to experience things like that. So music, yes, but as far as any kind of therapy that she could benefit from, even short term or long term, not that we've come across.
Wow. It's nice to get an update and to hear how she's doing.
Overall, she's happy, she is safe, so that will have to do. I think there's been much more negative impacts. I don't even want to call them negative. Much more significant impacts on those who are her caregivers or those who are legally responsible for her or to make decisions. That has it would impact anyone, of course, but those impacts are really starting to be felt, I think, especially with the death of their father, my grandmother's husband. So it's like caregiver exhaustion and just
Yeah.
could everyone get on the same page to decide what's in her best interest? No. There are some
Yeah.
very
And
strong other opinions, but it's everyone's trying to do their best. What everyone's best is probably different,
yeah.
but it's everyone's working with the information that they have and everyone is trying to do its best. I think the only people that are consistently doing what's best in my mom's best interest would be the facility because they
Right.
don't have type of relationship or connection and they're trained and that's what they do. They're the ones that know what's best. So I'm trying to just stay in
Yeah.
line with them.
And one of the other things that we talked about is we have a whole thread about things we could talk about on this
Yeah.
podcast. But one of them was your being diagnosed with BPD. And is that borderline personality disorder?
Correct. Most often confused with bipolar. But no,
Right.
BPD is
Yeah.
borderline personality disorder.
So I would love if you're comfortable to hear that
Sure.
journey.
And a journey it has been.
'Cause yeah, it's not something I'm familiar. We've interviewed people with bipolar, and I
Yep.
know that it's different. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear about that experience for you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it because borderline, for those who aren't familiar with it, and to be fair, if you Google it, it sounds awful.
Oh, no.
Well, and it is awful, but it can sound very scary. There's quite the
Yeah,
stereotype of people with borderline are abusive, erratic, violent, and you know what? Some are, but it depends. But some humans who aren't don't have it are. So I don't know
right.
that's specific to BPD, but for myself, the first time I was diagnosed and immediately ignored it, I I was, I think, 26. I'd been struggling with mental health issues, but my childhood and the majority of myself growing up, will make it very clear, this had nothing to do with my mom. It just had almost everything to do with her unfortunate choice in husband at the time. So I had a pretty horrible childhood. And if you do any research when it comes to BPD, those with BPD have some sort of traumatic childhood or some sort of significant trauma, which that happened for me quite a bit. And when you live in a chaotic, abusive environment, or that's where you're raised, lack of sense of self, lack of self confidence or self image or feeling safe, those are almost always gone. And those are the pretty huge precursors to BPD. So I was diagnosed by a psychiatrist with my doctor because I was like, yes, you have depression, tried the meds, nothing was helping. So then the medication that you would get for BPD is typically stronger than your like more common typical antidepressant. So we moved into
Okay.
that category of meds, and it just is often a higher dose or just a whole different category altogether. So I was first diagnosed when I was 25, 26. It took me quite some time to accept that because right when I was diagnosed is when I first looked it up. And I looked it up
Mm.
and was like deeply offended that
Yeah,
somebody
that is not
that is
me.
not me. And then the more I actually thought about it openly and honestly, I was like, oh, that is me. And I
Oh,
was
no.
like, "Oh, no." Because with borderline, depending where you're researching, there's typically 7 characteristics. Some people will say it's 9, but you need to either have 7 of the 9, 5 of the 7 in order to be classified as fitting the borderline diagnosis. And at the first time when I looked, it was like, "Oh, nice. All of them."
The one time you don't want 100% in something.
Yeah, I was like, "Great.
Yeah.
School was so hard, and now I get 100%, of course." But the good news with that diagnosis is that it allowed my doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist to really look into a proper medication. And
Mm,
I think for a borderline, there's so many different kinds of therapies you can do, the DBT, CBT, group therapy, one-on-one therapy. There's so much, and what works for one will definitely not work for another. What worked best
mm.
for me was the collaborative approach, although for me, I need my meds. And if
Yeah.
I forget to take them one day, which rarely happens, but actually happened the other night, I feel the effects of it immediately. It's almost immediate
Wow.
withdrawal, and mentally, I feel horrible. So it opened the door for me to actually get proper medication and actually, when I was younger, begrudgingly get into therapy. But that
Mm,
was the absolute game changer. So it's not to say that life as of right now is great and lovely and my day to day is good. I'm managing it, and it's taken about a decade for me to really finesse my day to day and actually to feel okay. But it's the amount of relationships or friendships that were destroyed along the way, or even whether with others or
oh,
myself, it's
yeah,
significant. So some of the stuff, yeah, I get it. Like when you Google it, sure, like
yeah.
the extreme, extreme highs and lows. The going from I'm happy 1 minute to a complete split and then completely different. Like I can with ease go from I'm feeling really good today to maybe I'll go off that cliff. And
Oh,
it's that
wow.
fast. So though on
Wow.
the outside, most people, unless you know me very well, would never know. That's because I'm medicated and in therapy. Inside, I feel pretty it's a battle. It's a constant battle. And I'm stubborn. I don't like to talk about my feelings, which makes it even harder because then I'm, of course, internalizing everything as well. So it's
Totally.
been very long, long journey. And even though the only reason I got on TikTok was because of my mom, but now that I'm on TikTok, you see more stuff about BPD. Got a Love Me For
Mhm.
You page. You can see what
Yeah.
I like. Like all
Yeah.
lesbians and BPD. And it's like perfect. But I've actually met like one of my now closest friends who has BPD. I met her on TikTok. She lives in Australia. To have someone I'm very lucky. I have very supportive friends, but unless you have it, you just cannot understand it or support that person in the way that they need. It's
Right.
impossible. You cannot. It's telling someone who's gone through chemo to be like, "I get it." When you've never had chemo, it's like you just can't.
Yeah. How would you describe BPD if somebody's like, "Oh, I've never heard of that. What is it?"
So BPD, the worst I don't know, the most mentally painful thing you could probably go through. And so for somebody who doesn't have it, the anguish that you felt at your worst moment or whatever the worst moment of your life was It's every single day. And it can look like a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but mental anguish and internal screaming while having to mask and therefore smile on the outside because you can't scream every day, all day. Not
Yeah.
acceptable. The biggest thing for me is a lack of self image and not really knowing who you are. Like when we're all younger, trying to figure out who we are, but having to do that. And for me, like now my late 30s and having to do it my entire life and my sense of self changing many times over the years. And then also dealing with a colorful life, I suppose I'll call it.
Wow.
It seems to be a lot of people who don't have BPD. Obviously, I'm talking about based on what I've seen online, but when Health Canada has approved medically assisted suicide for people with BPD, we're in that category. And a lot of people who
Wow.
don't have BPD are very offended. Why would there need to have more support and things like that? It's like, yeah, I agree. But what you need to keep in mind is that's how bad it is that if you don't
Yeah.
have the resources or meds or whatever it is that you need, that's how bad it is that they're approving medically assisted suicide for it. Because there's no cure for BPD, there's treatment. And not all treatment works for people. Sometimes meds don't work for one, sometimes therapy doesn't work. It depends on what your trauma is and why you got it.
And that's what's so interesting is that it's diagnosed as a result of
Yeah.
trauma. It's not like it's like something happened that changed your
Your
brain.
whole brain chemistry. Yeah. It happens
Yeah,
from probably more than one event, but depends what the event is. And usually
sure.
those events definitely will likely be similar and then create that you put yourself in other kinds of situations that codependent to said events and then poof, there you go. It's interesting. I know a lot of people are like, how did you get it? I'm like, well, I don't know that we have time for that today.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
give you my best guess, but ultimately I'm not even
Yeah.
sure because it's all a lot of like childhood or very young stuff. And I probably remember four things from my childhood collectively as a whole. The
Wow.
rest is
Yeah.
I don't remember at all. I mean, one positive part of my brain, it shut it down. So
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know. All I know is it was really bad. And so now I have BPD.
So you talked about having trouble with self-identity. Does so you've also talked about coming out as a late in
I
life
know.
lesbian.
Thank
Welcome to the
you.
club.
I know.
I should send out like welcome
It would be
packages.
so nice. I like totally like plot
Yeah.
twist, except I was the only one that was like, okay, I gotta tell everyone. Everyone I told was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, we all knew but me. Cool. Okay. Perfect.
So the BPD diagnosis came
Yes.
first and you were living your life
Yep.
with this. I do find the correlation interesting of if you have trouble with self-identity, coming out as anything but
Yeah.
straight is a big process for a lot of people. So what was that
You
journey
know,
like?
it was so interesting. And I mean, when I was younger, I always thought, like, in my teenage years, like, my first kiss was with a girl, but it was like, "Oh, she was my friend. Oh my god, that was it. That's cute." But it never occurred to me,
Yeah.
like, what it meant. I wasn't able to process what it meant. And so I dated guys, was always, like, consistently pretty unhappy with them, but this tied into my also past trauma. So I thought that this was
Mhm.
normal. You're not actually supposed to like, they're just there. And then so I was always dating guys and being, like, really unhappy. I think about it now and I'm like, "Ugh."
Yeah. Yes,
Just like,
same.
"Ew." Always very unhappy in the sense that there was just always something missing, and I could never identify what it was. I never knew what it was. It wasn't clear. It wasn't like, "Oh, if they did this would be better." And I always turned into, like, mom mode with them. Like, I was the caregiver because I was very good at that. But it was never like
Yeah.
a partner relationship. That part just it wasn't there, but I didn't know that it wasn't there. I was just like, no one's happy. Look at all these like movies, TV shows about marriage, everyone or like men and women
Yeah.
dating. The men are just like, ooh, like my old ball and chain. And the women are just like, I hate him,
Yeah.
but he's there. Would see women and be like, it's very good looking. I could appreciate the beauty. And then in my 20s, it was dabbled sexually, but any of the boyfriends at the time were just like, "Oh, it's so hot." And that was
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, it's hot, cool." It hadn't clicked. It was like, "Hey, you like this. It
It
is
is
hot, but it's
hot.
hot
Yeah.
for you." Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after my last like, my longest term relationship, when that ended, I guess it was a decade ago, I got very lucky. I got finally introduced into gay world. I didn't know it, I didn't know about it, but I ended up having this most amazing roommate who he's gay. And so he brought me to the gay bars, and then I started meeting all these whether on the queer, I'll call them queer, I don't like to just say gay. But, like, I
Yeah.
entered queer world, where I was in queer bars around queer people, and all different shapes, sizes, all different kinds of identities, and remember I was, like, 33, and I was like, "Oh, I belong." And it finally clicked, where I was like, "Oh, that everyone's, like, so happy and loving, and everyone seems to actually care about each other. I have these real friends, and they're, like, protective," and it was just like everything just finally clicked in, and I was like, "Oh, I'm part of this community. Okay, cool." So I finally just got to meet more people, speak to more people, hear about their journeys and how, and then I was like, "Okay, so maybe, like, pansexual then," because I was always like, I just love humans. I'm not really specific to a
Right.
gender or to someone who identifies as a certain gender. I was like, if you're male, great. If you're trans, great. If you're non-binary, great. If you're maybe not straight, but if you're but it just like, it didn't matter. And then I started dating women. And I was like, matters. Cool. I still very much
Yeah.
appreciate like all shapes and sizes and gender identities, but it's definitely women. And then it finally
Yeah.
just felt right. But it took me till I was 38, 39, no, 39. I'll be 40 in April. It took me that long for it to
Wow.
finally click. And unfortunately, I think I felt so unsure because of my BPD, because I just didn't, I never felt safer at home. But it's now like later occurred to me as talking
Mm.
with therapists that wasn't really the BPD. I've been properly medicated and in treatment since I was about 27, 28. It's taken me a long time to finesse it. But part of it was like, and lesbian. So I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
And then because of my trauma, all the
Yeah.
like really weird relationships I had with men and always being, they all did a very good job, and myself included, being like, well, you're just unhappy because you're unhappy. Hadn't occurred to me that was like,
Right.
yes, but also there's this other part of it.
Yeah.
And so then, yeah, it
Yeah.
finally clicked. So I remember speaking with my friend, my very good friend Brian. I was just like, I wholeheartedly really dislike straight men. Like it's like passionate about it. I just don't like them. I see them and I'm like, ugh. I have met bad experiences with them, but even like sexually on the side, I'm just like, why? No, just no. And
Yeah.
it's like an immediate. And Brian's like, this your dislike for them has grown quite a bit. And I was like, I know if you're a gay man, love you. Almost immediately love you. Trans men,
Yeah.
love you immediately. Doesn't matter. And then he's like, why don't you try dating women? And I was like, well, I'd only like participated in physical activities with women. I'd never dated them. And he's like, why don't you try dating them? So
Yeah.
I went, okay, change my Facebook dating settings, which I was like, felt like I internally changed. I was like, silly goose, this. And then I changed it on Facebook and started talking and dating with women, and yeah, that was it. So there's just so many different
Wow.
levels that everything went hand in hand. I mean, wish I'd known
Yeah.
sooner, but better late than never.
Yeah. I just think if there was just better representation of real relationships in all their
Huh.
shapes and sizes, you might have been able to see yourself in what was going to work
Yeah,
for you.
maybe. And I'm like blown away at
Yeah.
those who did accomplish that in the same schools as me or same environments of me. Like, how did you figure it out?
Yeah.
And how are you so brave to just really be yourself as you were? Like, even back then, I'm not saying it's easier now, but there's more outspoken people around. I remember being in high school and there was like one gay guy. For sure there was more. The high school
Yeah.
is 2,000 people. There's no way there was one. There was one out
Oh,
one.
yeah.
And then what about
Hmm.
those who weren't out or those who were just somewhere on the spectrum, had no idea what the spectrum even was?
Yeah. There was no
Oh,
words for it. There was no discussion about it. There was no,
yeah, my only understanding of lesbians when I was younger is that like straight guys sounded hot. So it's like, oh, you make out with your
right.
friends
Yeah.
when you're drunk. And it was like, I do for different reasons than perhaps what other people do.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. It hadn't occurred to me.
Yeah, I've said it 1,000 times, but, like, growing up, my first exposure to lesbians was Jerry
Oh,
Springer,
Jerry
and,
Springer.
like,
Yeah.
it was like, "My wife is dating another." It was just
Yeah,
awful. It was the way they were portrayed and
horrible.
characterized was not how I felt. I didn't see myself in that. We didn't have the JoJo Siwas,
The new L
I don't
word, yeah.
the new L Word, and yeah, we didn't have those characters and celebrities that were showing.
Yeah.
What was it like coming out as a later in life lesbian, like, professionally,
I
personally?
mean, personally, again, I have one very good friend who's my lifelong best friend who is straight. Everyone else is queer. We're all very understanding, and I think that's where they thought they were like, "Yeah, and?" Like, "Girl, we knew." And
Yeah, it's
also,
not a
"Who
big deal.
cares?" Like, whatever.
Yeah,
They're like, "Great, you do
yeah.
you." Even my grandparents were just like, "As long as you're happy." And no one batted an eye.
Oh,
It was very I was just like, "Hey, so it's this," and people went, "Yeah." I went, "Oh." Very, very that was not an exciting conversation for anyone. But I guess that's great
yeah.
is the majority of the people who were close in my life already knew, and the ones who didn't, I may as well have told them I had orange juice for breakfast, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, cool." So that part, I was very lucky. It just felt if you've not been home for years and then you finally just open the door and you're like, "I'm home." And so that was it. I know there's so many other stories that are not as light and quick as mine. I think I'm probably on the side where it's like very few are like that, very few. Professionally, even at the law firm I worked at in Calgary, there was one person there who was not on the spectrum. So it was just, again, a very queer environment. Where I work now, it was very different. And it was the one of the first few times where I felt unsure. The law firm I work at now, the majority of the people there are Lebanese and practicing Muslim. And I didn't know enough.
Mm,
I had only known what I heard, so I thought in the interview, "I'm moving here for my partner. Please know what that means. Not my girlfriend, not my husband, not
yeah,
my boyfriend, partner. Please know what that means."
yeah,
And there was no one bat an eyelash, but the more I looked into parts of Muslim culture or the other culture, I was like, "I don't know if this is okay." I don't know that they know because I don't know how much
yeah,
experience they have in that world at all, and I'm gonna suspect it's probably not much.
right,
So, I'm like, they only know what they've been told, and what they've been told, like, who's told them? That depends who they are. So, I was very
right.
nervous, and I was, again, very luckily met with nothing but love, and it didn't matter. They've asked me questions, I've asked them. My boss recently asked, "Do you ever feel uncomfortable in public?" And I was like, "Yeah, sometimes in some stores, depending where we are.
Yeah.
Yes." And he's like, "Sometimes I feel uncomfortable in public too." 'Cause he's Lebanese, right? So like he has a
Wow.
very specific
Yeah,
look to him and a very specific, often
yeah.
misunderstanding about him. He dresses well, has a BMW, and I'm like, "You're not helping yourself really much." And he was like, "Oh no, but I," he's like, "But I really love my car." I know you do, but like he's taking the time to ask. And I said, "Do you ever feel uncomfortable or have you ever been somewhere and been like stared at?" I'm like, "Yes." And I'm not very outwardly presenting, not as much as others. And so I don't find it that obvious, but if I'm out with a partner, then obviously I haven't had to experience anything really negative. I don't know how well I would take that.
I do feel that I think I'm less straight passing now than I once was, but there's words that you use to out yourself, but in a dipping the
Yep.
toe kind of cautious way. Like I will specifically say my partner or drop a her, she pronoun when speaking of my partner. And you guard
Yep.
yourself a little bit to catch reactions and hope that they pick up what you're putting down
Yes.
and that it's fine.
Yeah, so when I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
moving here for my partner," and then they're like, "Okay, and so what other work did you do at the firm?" And I was like, "Oh, we don't care or we don't know. Let's go for we don't
Yeah.
care." And it ended up being that, so I'm lucky
Mhm.
that way. But it's been a wild
Good.
ride, but I must say with my experience with BPD made it, I think, an easier ride. It could have been more difficult, but I had already been
Mm.
accustomed to so much difficult that it just lessened the impact.
Yeah.
I have more than a decade experience, an arsenal of tools that I can get myself through, like excruciating mental trauma. or like a mental issue. And then like I know how to cope with the hard stuff. So I at least have that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Lots went on in
Wow.
2 years.
I feel like I know. I was going to say, it feels like we just talked recently, but a lot's been
Yeah, a
going
lot.
on.
I don't even know what more to say, honestly. Like someone told me a year ago, hey, not only are you going to officially come out, you're also going to get a new job and you're going to move. Oh, and P.S., you have a partner. I would have been like, no, there's nothing you can do to make me believe that. Absolutely not. 'Cause again, like with BPD, relationships are so hard. So I'd settled in the idea of I'm not going to like the marriage thing, that's not going to be for me because I don't know if I'm capable or I'm certain I won't find
Mm,
someone who is capable of dealing with me in that way unless they also have BPD. And
yeah,
then if we both have BPD and we're both like in a low
right.
moment, ooh, I don't know. Like, I was completely bamboozled by this person and it just caught me out of nowhere. And then, so yeah, I moved and here we are.
That's amazing. I just love your
Anytime.
openness and willingness to share
We'll
and
just go down our list.
update. It's so nice.
I think we covered off like 3 things this
Yeah.
time. Well, thank you. It's always lovely seeing you and speaking to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day
Thank you.
and we'll have to talk really soon.
Yes, we will. We will.
Okay. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I hope you found our conversation informative and entertaining. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow me on social media, share this podcast with your friends, and leave a review at ratethispodcast.com/I did not sign up for this. Your support means the world to me. If you want more interviews, exclusive content, and ad-free episodes, join the Patreon at patreon.com/I did not sign up for this. I hope you all have a fantastic week ahead, and we'll talk soon.